the Public Works and Infrastructure Department, again raising concern about the impact of extortion rings on the country's economy. The minister responsible for that portfolio, Dean Macpherson, this morning has called for tough action to be taken to eradicate the so-called construction mafias. The minister joins me now for more on today's National Construction Summit. Minister, good evening to you. That summit, it would appear that what it has done is to elicit headlines such as what I'm reading in front of me here, that South Africa's construction sector is under siege. Would that be a correct characterization, Minister?
Good evening, Holly, and good evening to your viewers. I think that we need to put it in perspective. Of course, there are stoppages. We know that. We know that it has a detrimental effect to our infrastructure plans, that they cost the economy 64 billion rand over the last 5 years, that they lead to intimidation and violence, and it severely dents investor confidence in the state's ability to deliver projects on time and on budget. Yeah. So it is a crisis that we have to deal with, which is why we convened the National Summit today. And I was really grateful to my colleague, Minister Senzo Mchunu, Deputy Minister Ashwell Sarupan from Treasury, for joining us. And we had some hard and difficult discussions around how we need to close the gaps and loopholes to ensure that the state reclaims these sites. The state reclaims its authority in terms of law and order, and that we get our construction projects back on track. And that's what we came out with today, as a firm commitment, what we termed as the Durban Declaration, where we have agreed on 5 key principles and 5 key issues that need to be tackled by government in a uniformed way.
That headline, I extracted it from the News 24 website, news site, Minister, and they are saying over 200 extortion cases have been reported in South Africa's construction sector this year alone. Here's the question I have for you. Did it surprise you that it is the Eastern Cape province that accounts for 50% of these cases?
Well, I mean, my honest reaction and answer to that is that, I don't think that, we should highlight or celebrate it being in any particular area that one is more than the other. I think the point is that wherever these take place, that they have devastating consequences for communities. And so it's clearly an issue that is growing. But I must say that the state's resolve has redoubled since the elections. I publicly commended Minister Mchunu and the generals there today, that they are fighting back incredibly hard. But, it requires an all-of-society approach. You can't just look at the police and say, over to you. The role of the private sector is crucial. The role of provincial governments, of social facilitation, of ensuring that we don't incentivize the mafia is also equally important. So, I stay up at night knowing that the Eastern Cape is responsible for 50% of these extortion cases. But I'm equally inspired by the work that the MEC for Public Works and Infrastructure is doing in that province, where she is personally leading facilitation projects to bring them back on track, to keep those gangsters out, often at, one's own personal safety. But she's doing it because she loves her province, she loves her communities, and she knows that this has to be a hands-on approach, and that we incentivize our communities to look after and own their infrastructure, and keep the crooks and thugs at bay.
Yeah. Talking about a mafia style of doing things here, Minister, I want to transition to a different topic altogether. And this is something that you will be familiar with, the Independent Development Trust. This is an entity that falls under your department. And the reason I'm using the word mafia in the same sentence is that there is the oxygen plant tender. And at some point, you had given this entity a deadline to explain what exactly was going on. And just in the past week, the very entity told us on this channel that Mr. Nathi Ndlovu, the sole proprietor of the company that received the largest share of this tender, he had been killed. What's going on in that particular tender, Minister? Are you able to explain that here to us tonight?
Let me say, Xoli, first of all, and South Africans who know me well enough know that I will never tolerate a single rand being misappropriated under my watch. And that's why the moment that that issue came to my attention through the Daily Maverick, and I commend them for the investigative work that they have done on the story, I immediately wrote to the Independent Development Trust, and I said I want answers. I wasn't satisfied with the answers that I got. It was incredibly vague, and at times completely just didn't answer the questions that I had posed. I then submitted follow-up questions to them, and I've received now very detailed responses, contracts, documents, and filings, which you'd appreciate are often voluminous in time and do take a bit of while to go through. I want to completely satisfy myself around this whole issue before I pronounce on it. But I've written to the President to brief him on the issue, as well as the Minister of Health. We have our teams on this working through it as quickly as possible. And I assure the South African public that where wrongdoing is found, and that people will be held accountable, and not just accountable by losing their jobs. They will be criminally prosecuted. I'm not casting aspersions on this case. There are, of course, some very concerning flags that have been raised around this, particularly as it does involve health and oxygen, which is life-saving for many people in this country. And so it's incumbent on me that I get to the bottom of this as quickly as possible, that I have the facts available so that I can present them to government and to the people of this country to show them exactly what has transpired and what action we are taking on it.
Just briefly then, is it safe to say that the tender in question is still in force, or has it been cancelled? Oh no, the Minister completely frozen as we ended that conversation. All right, but at least you've got the gist of where I was going with this. And Dean Macpherson, Minister, I'm told you back very quickly. I thought I'd lost you completely there. Finally then, on this tender, very briefly if you can, is it safe to say that this tender is still in force, or has it been cancelled?
Xoli, it will only be cancelled once I've satisfied myself that there is wrongdoing. I do hope to conclude the matter as quickly as possible, because if there is irregularities, obviously I don't want money to be wasted or to be paid over that it shouldn't. So that's why there is a sense of urgency to resolve this. It is, of course, slightly complex and complicated in that it is a trust and it is not a board. So there are issues around trust deeds and how it operates, but we want to make sure that we do everything compliant, so that our hands are clean on this. But I really want to assure the people of this country that we will always act in their best interest as quickly as possible.
Dean Macpherson, thank you very much for your time. The Public Works and Infrastructure Department, and on that very last issue we were speaking about, important to mention that this has been the investigative work of colleagues at the Daily Maverick and working alongside Amapungane.